What if everything you think you know about content planning is actually working against you? I've seen more change in content marketing in the last 9 months than in the previous 10 years combined. And if you're still planning content the old way, you're already behind. In this video, I'm sharing 10 lessons that will completely change how you plan, create, and show up with your content. I cannot believe that I've been publishing the Content Empire Planner for 10 years already. The very first version was for 2016, and here I am creating a version for next year. It is wild to me how much has changed, but also all of the lessons this planner has personally taught me, and some of those lessons have been really kind of painful. Like most good product origin stories, I created this because it was a tool that I personally needed, and it's evolved to meet the needs of the time. The content planner that I needed in 2016 is so different than the content planner I need today. I recently did a content reset retreat, and one of the things I kept saying again and again is that I've seen more change in the first bit of this year, or this year so far, than in the previous 10 years of business combined. So much has shifted with how we market, how we create content, and if you're clinging on, white knuckling, resisting change the way my natural tendency is, it's really going to come back to bite you. So in this video, not only am I celebrating the launch of the newest Content Empire Planner, check it out below, but I'm also sharing with you the 10 biggest lessons that I've learned after a decade of content planning. These are things that are going to carry you into next year and beyond. So let's dig in with lesson number 1. The first big lesson is a personal one, and I definitely struggle with it. Here is a word that I made up that perfectly captures what most of us are doing wrong when it comes to content planning: procrasti-planning. It's the combination of procrastination and planning, and it's not doing anyone any favors. Planning for planning's sake isn't helping you. It's actually just allowing you to procrastinate and put off creating and publishing your content. And it's definitely not helping your audience who actually needs the things that you want to be talking about. Here's the thing. I love a fresh plan. That is my natural tendency, and I can find myself falling into this trap too. But what I've learned is that planning without implementation is really just a fancy way to avoid the scary part, hitting publish. That's why one of the biggest shifts I've made with the Content Empire Planner is making it equally or even more about following through on that plan. That's where the implementation tools like the batching workflows and content creation workflows come in, because a plan is only as good as your ability to actually execute it. Lesson number 2 is to become a content habit architect. You might think you need the perfect content strategy, but that's exactly what is going to stop you from actually creating content. What you actually need is to approach your content like a habit architect, a la James Clear. We want to change what we're measuring. Instead of focusing on engagement or leads right away, let's create the smallest version of success, especially if you're just getting started or having trouble getting consistent. What is your MVO? Your minimum viable output. What's that one thing that you could commit to doing every single week? Because what I've learned is it's much easier to master the basics and layer on to that than it is to design the perfect content system with all the bells and whistles that you'll never be able to follow up on or follow through on, especially without these systems and experience to back it up. Here is how to take a content habit architecture approach. Step 1, define your MVO. So what is the smallest piece of content that you could put out every single week? Maybe you start bi-weekly, maybe monthly. That's totally fine. You can also play with frequency. Step 2, design a simple system around it. What happens first? What do you need to do next? Break it down into bite-sized steps from start to finish. And then step 3, when it comes to increasing your frequency or quality, focus on getting like 1% better each time that you run it. And here is the big part. For the first 90 days, make your metrics about showing up. Make that the win. Track the reps that you do, not the results that they generate at first. How many times did you follow through on your weekly plan? You'll go much further faster doing it this way. Content planning lesson number 3 is about starting to treat your content like the asset that it actually is, something that's going to change everything, I hope, is that you can add old content to your content plan. You don't always need to be creating brand new content. One of the problems that people run into is viewing their content as this one and done thing that's no longer holds any value after it's published. This leads to a cycle of always needing to create more when in many cases you could just be resharing the same content, especially if it's been a while. When it comes to your signature frameworks and your signature expertise, you shouldn't always have something new to say. The repetition is where a lot of the value for your audience lies. You might be able to update it or give it a relevant spin, but you don't need to start from scratch. My biggest lesson here has been to treat my content like an asset and set up a literal content bank for it. I organize all my content as assets and categorize them so they're easily findable. When I'm planning my content and I know it's going to be a busy week, I shop my content bank before I create anything new. There are seasons where you're going to have a lot more going on and working on other creative projects. That's the perfect time to pull existing content into your plan. And when things are a bit lighter, that's when you refill up and restock that content bank with new assets and new content. Next lesson is to think tiny. We're so focused on big goals that we often ignore the low-hanging fruit opportunities right in front of us for optimizing something that we're already doing. That's one of the big reasons why I open the planner up with a 360-degree review of your past year in business before we get into goal setting for the next year. There are so many ideas for improvement that are relatively simple and quick to implement. For example, I found that I wasn't getting a lot of testimonials, and when I asked myself how could I get more testimonials from clients because I know that they were happy, they were re-signing up for things, I realized that I wasn't actually asking for them. I didn't have a system around it. So I added one automated email to our process for requesting testimonials and feedback, and just from implementing that one tiny change, now we have almost too many testimonials to work with. This shows how we make things a lot more complicated than they need to be many times. Big system shift number 4 is to turn ideas into a system. It's often not a lack of ideas that business owners are struggling with. It's not having the right ideas at the right time when you actually sit down to create content. One of the biggest things that I've learned is to create a system around tracking, categorizing, and using my ideas. Having ideas in the shower doesn't help when you're sitting at your computer with a blank screen. One of my favorite sections in the planner is the 100 Content Ideas Challenge. Come up with 100 ideas and have a spot, whether it's in the planner or a spreadsheet, something that you're regularly collecting your ideas in as they come to you, and organizing them and storing them so they're accessible when you need them. Review those ideas regularly, especially when you're creating content. There's nothing like feeling inspired and in flow when creating content, and having an idea that you're excited about is a huge component of that. This system has made a big difference in my business and for my clients who implement it. Speaking of simple shifts, one of the simplest yet most significant changes that I've made for my own content, and a huge light bulb moment in how I work with clients, is centering your offer. You want to make sure that all of your content that you put out leads back to your offer. Maybe not in an overtly pitchy way, but it should be so related to your offer that the people that you're attracting who are consuming that content, reading that content, could potentially be ideal clients, right? We want to make sure there's a connection between the two things. You would not believe the number of people who are just coming up with ideas for ideas' sake, creating content that they can't draw a strong line back to their offer from. Educational content has gotten a really bad rap lately, with people declaring that educational content is dead. But I think that it's this unfocused way of doing educational content that has really been the problem all along. We need to theme your content around your offer. And here's the rule. You should have one theme, one offer chosen to focus on for at least a single month, right? It can stay the same, it can change, but you should stick with that offer for at least 4 weeks or a month to really see any traction. And during that month, every single thing that you publish is related topic-wise to the topic of your offer. Content planning lesson number 7 is going all in on less platforms. You can get much better results from your content by focusing on doing less and showing up in fewer places. It might seem counterintuitive, but it makes a lot of sense. A core framework in my approach is the EASE content framework: expertise, attraction, sales, and engagement. In essence, you don't need all the different platforms or strategies at the same time. What you do need need is one strategy or platform for each of those 4 categories. You need some way of establishing your expertise, so usually long form content. You need some way of attracting a new audience and getting your content and your brand and your offers in front of new people. You need some method of selling each month, and you need some way of engaging with your audience through two-way conversations. Where I see people go wrong is trying multiple attraction platforms but having nothing for engagement. That creates a really unbalanced strategy. If you're missing expertise, people don't have enough trust with you to buy. If you're missing attraction, you're not bringing in fresh leads and your sales stagnate. Plus, you'll see higher audience attrition. If you're missing engagement, people don't have enough relationship cred with you to say yes. And if you're missing sales, you become the best kept secret, but you're not making any sales. The monthly content map in the planner makes sure that you're covering all your bases for each one of these areas. Content planning lesson number 8, create before you consume. Here is something that I know for myself. I can start getting into trouble and feeling disconnected from my purpose, my business, and my audience if I stop the practice of creating content. That's particularly true when I'm taking in a lot of other people's content. Don't get me wrong, some of my best ideas come from listening to other people's podcasts and videos and coming up with my own spin or application to my specific niche. However, you want to create before you consume. There's something called morning pages from Julia Cameron's The Artist Way. This idea of getting your thoughts onto the page. I like to make this more purposeful by gearing it towards your business. One thing that I do is I open my workday up with a 25-minute writing sprint on any topic, particularly something thought leadery or something that I have opinions about. I pull these topics from my idea bank, and by doing this practice, I never run out of content to share on social media that I can expand on for blog posts and newsletters. Writing is a skill, and by doing it regularly, you're getting better at it and quicker at it. The 30-day challenge in the planner is a perfect place to develop this daily writing or content habit. And I just want to add here that even if you are not a writer, right, even if you are doing videos or even if you are doing podcast episodes, writing is still a part of that skill set that you need to develop. Content planning lesson number 9, constraints help creativity. Systems get kind of a bad rep from creatives who think that having workflows will sap their creativity, but what I've witnessed is actually quite the opposite. Having systems and constraints actually frees you up to be more creative and gives you more time for the things that matter most. It's helpful to know that on this day, you're going to write this thing. Any systems that you put in place will take experimentation to find what works for you, but having those systems is key to being more creative with your content and having more time to explore and be creative. By coming up with your ideas ahead of time, when you actually sit down to create content, you're not wasting any of that creative energy deciding what to write about. This is really important because there are different sides of the brain, right? The executive planning side versus the creative side. I have a rule. I will never sit down to write or create a piece of content without already knowing what that thing is. That's why this planning process is so important and why I dedicate time to both planning and creating. And finally, here's my final lesson. And it might sound a bit woo-woo, but hear me out. Treat your content planning like a retreat at least once a year. Make this a really special event, whether you do it an at-home retreat, go to an Airbnb, shack up at a hotel, or get completely out of town. Make this fun and special. I know that my best ideas come from getting out of my usual space and away from my Kindle and away from Netflix. Turn your content planning into something that you look forward to, not just another business task that you have to check off your list. These are the lessons that have completely transformed how I approach content. It's only taken me 10 years, and how the Content Empire Planner has evolved over the past decade. If you want a complete system for reviewing your year, planning your content and marketing goals, and a quarterly, monthly, and weekly system for following through on that content plan, check out the Content Empire Planner. Link is below.